Welcome, everyone. Welcome. It's so great to see so many people participating. I'm so glad that you could join us, especially today, because today is IU Day. This day is a great reminder of how we're all part of a big IU family, and we need to support each other and share our stories. You know, the subject of resiliency is, of course, incredibly timely right now. We've been talking to our students a lot about perseverance, adaptability, and tenacity as we all have to adjust to all the challenges of the pandemic, and it all adds up for us. And I know we're getting a little weary, but we need to show that resiliency a little bit longer. Studies show, and of course, surveys and statistics within those studies, that the impact on working women of the pandemic has been especially hard. Unemployment rates for women were greater. Women were more often underpaid caregivers for elderly parents and more often gave up their jobs to care for children at home. So even in the best of times, women are more likely to face challenges and roadblocks and setbacks, some created by others, some created by ourselves, but we keep going. And it's important that we continue to learn and grow and to remain authentic to ourselves and, importantly, to lift up each other. I want to acknowledge that during an already incredibly challenging year, women of color in our Kelley community additionally have experienced heightened fear and anxiety and anger because of racism and injustices and inequities and prejudice. There are friends, our students, our professors, members of the Kelley staff and alumni. We stand together with you. And I want to reiterate Kelley's commitment to creating a more diverse and equitable and inclusive environment at our schools so we can have a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment in the workplace and in our communities. We're happy to be able to host this webinar for our Kelley community of women, and I'm grateful to our alumni panelists for taking the time to share their experiences with us. You will meet them in just a few minutes, but before that, I want to personally thank Sherry Davis, Kristen Mays Corbett, and Chrissy Vasquez, who are the panelists for today. Their time is quite precious, and we are eternally grateful for you joining us today and sharing with our students. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for making this possible: Busey Bank, IU Credit Union, Taft Law, Tire Rack, Visit Bloomington, and Wing Thai Asia. And now I want to introduce our fabulous moderator for the day, Charlotte Westerhouse Renfro. She is faculty chairperson of the undergraduate program at the Kelley Indianapolis campus and a clinical professor of business law and management. She teaches undergraduate and MBA courses focused on team dynamics, leadership, negotiations, and cultural intelligence. She earned her bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in higher education administration from Ohio University and a law degree from the IU Maurer School of Law. She was the first African-American female to be admitted to the Indiana Law Journal and served as assistant editor. Charlotte has led professional development initiatives and inclusive diversity programs for several organizations, and she's a highly sought after consultant and speaker. She serves on the Indiana State Bar Association's Board of Governors and the Indiana State Board of Law Examiners. Charlotte, thank you so much for serving as our moderator today, and I'm going to turn the session over to you.
Thank you, Dean Kessner. That was a wonderful introduction, and I share your excitement about this panel. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful panel: how to succeed, and especially this topic, how to advocate for you with a resilient brand. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel. Today we have with us in alphabetical order, Sherry Davis. And Sherry is the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of Lilly USA. That is Eli Lilly, if you haven't heard of it. Okay, and who hasn't? And also she is a proud alum with a Bachelor's of Science in 2000. And so I could read more about each one of these fabulous backgrounds, but they're going to talk a little bit about themselves, I'm sure, as they answer the questions that we have ready for them and questions from you as well. Next, I want to introduce Kristen Mays Corbett. and she is the president of Mays Chemical. And I just say president. We've got some heavy hitters on the panel today. And Kristen received her Bachelor's of Science from Kelley in 1998 and an MBA from us in 2002. Welcome, Sherry and Kristen. And finally, Chrissy Bakpez. And she received her MBA as well. And there she is. I want to say, Chrissy, let's say that face. There you go. All right. And she is account manager with Advent Healthcare, a powerhouse of a panel. And I'm going to be the fortunate facilitator or moderator of this particular panel. And I have some questions I'm going to ask the panel, but you also have an opportunity within the chat. If you have any questions about the four panelists or want a little bit more clarification or follow-up, please join in. This is interactive. So, esteemed panel, are you ready? I know you are. Let's start with the first question that kind of ties in with the theme, advocating and a resilient personal brand. Now, Dean Kessler mentioned I have a law degree, so I'm always into definitions and the small print. So I want to make sure that we also incorporate your definition. So to you as a female leader, a respected, successful female leader, what does it mean to have a resilient brand? And any one of you can start in answering this question.
Well, I'll go. So maybe we'll start in alphabetical order. For me, having a resilient brand is somewhat about the strength in vulnerability. None of us are perfect. None of us are without mistakes. None of us are without challenges. And I think owning those and using those as fuel to improve and as a way to deepen my strengths and to be self-aware is how I see resiliency.
I'm going to say, do you have a role model as far as how you develop your personal brand, Sherry?
Yes, my mother, Mary Ann Logwood. I am her child all day. I say that all the time. My mother was a single mother, divorced, 4 kids, and she never ever gave us any excuses not to do our best because of what she had managed in her life. And it wasn't that she shied away from her imperfections. It was that she was able to do very awesome things and teach us about having higher expectations, even though she never shied away from the fact that she wasn't perfect and had her own challenges.
All right, and that is typical. And actually research shows this out as far as resilience. If you have gritty, resilient parents, typically your children will be gritty and resilient. See, I've got a nods from the panelists. So that just proves that out. It's so important to have that as a role model in your family, in your community, even as a teacher. All right. So thank you, Sherry. And I'm gonna ask the same question to Christian. So for you, what does a resilient brand mean as a female leader?
Yeah, I want to build off of what Sherry said. So, I think it's resiliency to me means standing the test of time, but it also means evolving and learning from your mistakes, learning from other people's mistakes, and learning from your successes. And so it can be constantly evolving, but I think it's also constantly learning. And again, my role models were my parents, and both of them come from different backgrounds, but both of them had to be resilient within their own rights. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
All right. And you said your parents were your role models?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What kind of
Yes.
attributes did you learn from them as far as being resilient?
Just in their different fields of work. My father was in business. My mother is an educator. And so the different things that they had to go through, challenges and nuances to excel within their field. Their fields are two totally different fields, valued by society very differently. But they had some of the same challenges with excelling and, building their own brand within those industries, and really watching that and being a conscious observer of that really helped make me the person who I am today.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mhm.
Chrissy,
Yeah, so
what
many
does a
wonderful.
resilient brand? Go ahead. What does it mean to
I
you?
was, I was gonna say so many wonderful things have been said, and I agree with all of them. I think when I think about a resilient brand, especially a personal brand, I think about regardless of whatever the situation is, your brand is maintained. So you have those core values, you know your true north, and so regardless of good or bad, you're going to be able to maintain that brand, and people will know that brand. I do think that a lot of times as women, we really have to prove ourselves in some situations. So having that resilient brand really helps you in those situations. And I would definitely say that I got a lot of my examples from my parents as well. So I think I'm a perfect blend of the two of them. I have my mom's love and compassion and caring heart, and I have my dad's mind for service and business. So between the two of them, I would say I'm a perfect blend of that. And I saw a lot of resilience from them growing up. My dad worked in corporate sales, and so we moved every 18 to 24 months. So my mom's job was really to keep the kids in school and keep us on track as we moved across the country. And so she would find jobs as we moved. And then my dad went through a lot, traveling so much as corporate sales. So just watching their resilience throughout the years as they built a strong family.
All right. Thank you, Chrissy. I'm going to ask you one more question a little bit later on in regards to how to advocate that, but I'm still kind of want to get a little bit deeper into your personal brand. And I'm going to read you a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, and ask you a follow-up question. And the quote is this: I would encourage us to try to develop courage. It's the most important of all virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. Now, you can be anything erratically. You can be kind. Actually, you can be anything consistently, I would say. You can be kind, fair, and true, all of that. But there's one thing, time after time, Maya said, that you need to be, and that is courage. So, how do you incorporate courage into your resilient personal brand?
I can take that first. I think it goes back to learning from your mistakes, because to make a mistake is really having the courage to try something and you don't know if it will be successful. One thing that I have always heard that has resonated with me, literally from my time in undergrad at Kelley, all the way until, just last week we were talking about this, is it's fine to fail, but then the next time fail faster. But you have to have courage to even try something. And so I love that quote. I was very excited when I saw that quote was going to be a part of the panel, because you do have to have courage, and you do have to incorporate that into your personal brand, and to make sure that your brand is resilient and lasts the test of time. You just have to have the courage to try things, whether you know that they're going to work or not. And then you learn from that and you develop, who you are.
Christian, how do you exhibit or display courage? Because I think that for women, if we come across as sometimes being courageous, it may come across as being, one, strong, or number two, bulletproof. Like, we're fearful of nothing. So how do you actually display that in a way that can advocate who you are?
Yeah, I think it's a quandary. So you have to display courage, but you have to display the vulnerability too. And you have to be able to admit when you're wrong. And again, when I reflect back on my time at Kelley, both in undergrad and getting my MBA, you have to be vulnerable with your team in order to lead, so they can understand that it is okay to fail. And sometimes that means you have to be the first one to say, yep, I made a mistake. Even if it wasn't your mistake, as the leader of the team, you've got to be willing to take that position and take that role and say, okay, I made the mistake. in letting us go down this path, or we made the mistake. But you've got to show that vulnerability while you are showing the courage to try something new.
That's a great example. The vulnerability is a courageous trait, or something that you can do. Thank you so very much. And what about you, Chrissy?
Yeah, when I think about my career and think back on things, I wouldn't say that I was always the most courageous person. And I think a lot of that came not only from my teamwork and my experience at Kelley during the MBA program, but several years later, I got actually into triathlon. And I'm not the typical looking triathlete. And so there was definitely a lot of judgment. Triathlon, there's some really nice people and there's some very not so nice people. So to be in a place that most people didn't think I belonged took a lot of courage. And I didn't see that at the time. But really putting myself out there and trying something, like you said, being willing to fail. I was always back of the packer, last person to finish. Talk about being willing to fail there. But through that, I got so much growth. I think I got in touch with who I am, and that when you're courageous, amazing things unfold for you. So for example, doing triathlon, which I was never a podium finisher, never somebody that people looked at, so, look at how fast she is. But from that, I was able to do a video for the Kelley School of Business on the How We Succeed. I was able to do a TEDx presentation at Eli Lilly a few years ago about reinvention. So it opened up all these doors, and I was really able to then translate that back to my career, and that taking those risks will really help, bring rewards. And most recently, I've been in nonprofit for 15 years in executive leadership in nonprofit, and I completely did a 180 on my career after losing my job due to COVID. And now I'm on the corporate side of things. And that took a lot of courage to leave everything I knew. I'm basically starting at the beginning again. I'm learning new processes, new systems. And so I really look back on where I've picked up that courage over the years and how I've applied it to things that really bring great rewards.
That is a courageous, and this word's been used a lot, a pivot.
Yeah.
Not just changing quickly, all right? It's doing it with courage, not knowing that when you pivot, you not know where you want to go, but you don't know exactly where you're going to end up.
Yeah, and how I found my way was because I had those core values, and corporate leadership and culture is so key to me, and I wasn't getting that in the nonprofit world. When I sought out my new company, culture was number one. And so that's why I'm at where I am today, is because the culture at Avant is incredible. It's a woman-owned business, and culture is number one. And so it's been a great change.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it's been wonderful. Sherry, what about you? Courage. How do you actually incorporate that in your personal resilient brand?
For me, I think about this from a standpoint of being in finance. Sometimes you have to deliver good news. Sometimes you have to deliver bad news. And it's easy to do any of these things. I love Maya Angelou. And one of our quotes, "Tell the truth to yourself first," is one of my favorite quotes by her. But it's easy to tell the truth. It's easy to be fair and kind in a situation that it's where it's convenient. And I think the courage to do things when it's not convenient is what allows you to do them consistently. And I want to talk back to Christian's point about the vulnerability. Like, you can't have courage if there's not fear, right? So they go together. If you're doing something that's easy for you and you enjoy that, you don't need courage to do that. You need courage to do the things where you have fear. And so that, to me, they go together. And I think that that's an important part of being able to admit that, but moving forward anyway.
Now I'm going to say and I wasn't going to quite do this, but I hear a theme, Sherry, among all you about vulnerability. And I think I heard Christine, maybe it was you, Sherry, another quote from Maya Angelou, but my favorite quote is, "To thine own self be true." So you have your personal brand, you've got the actual courage, but how can you remain authentic, true to yourself, and also be vulnerable? It seems like it may be counterintuitive. You can't be both, or can you be both?
I think you can.
I think you can.
I think you actually have to be vulnerable to be authentic. I don't know anyone who is never vulnerable and is telling the truth.
What do you mean
I
by
think,
that? I mean, I'm sorry, I want to follow Sherry to get Kristen. What do you mean by that?
sure.
I mean, I think in my personal experience, I think everyone has insecurities. I think everyone has weaknesses. Particularly this pandemic has highlighted multiple of mine. I think that you have to be vulnerable to allow people to see the real you. Because if you are projecting something else and that is rejected, then you can always say, well, that's not the real me anyway. But it takes real vulnerability to put yourself out there. And if people don't like that, then you have to say, okay, well, that's okay. They don't like me, but that's harder. So that's where I see it.
Okay, that takes courage too. And Kristen, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're going to get ready.
No, that's fine. I just along the same lines, I think they go hand in hand. So I think to be vulnerable, you have to be honest. You have to have some integrity, enough integrity to put yourself out there and be willing to say, okay, this didn't work, or this is what I'm thinking, or even to really speak your mind. You have to have a sense of honesty and of courage to really do that. So I think, and that's being true to yourself, right? That's saying what you think or what you thought and expressing that and feeling comfortable enough with whomever you're expressing that to, and then hearing a response. So I think they go hand in hand.
Okay. And you said something about feeling comfortable with the person that you're speaking with. So I'm going to ask a question. What happens if you're not comfortable, but you have to speak? What tips do you have on that? And then Chrissy, I'll get back to you too, as with the same question.
Sure. I mean, again, I think that is, so if you're not comfortable with someone, it may indicate that you don't know them well enough. And that is an opportunity for you to, so it's all about how you view it, right? It can either be viewed as, not a good situation, not a positive situation, or an opportunity to build your resilient brand. And how you respond in that moment, if you look at it as an opportunity, again, you're going to be more vulnerable with people that you are probably more comfortable with, and that is a part of your inner team or your circle. But that doesn't mean you can't be vulnerable with others, and that's really building your brand. That's letting others know how you behave, so that they know how you will behave the next time.
Fantastic. And Chrissy, I'm going to let you jump in here and share, but then I just noticed, and I know Allison was helping with me, an excellent question I'm going to ask you after that. So Chrissy, what about you, as far as remaining authentic and yet being vulnerable, and how that can actually enhance your personal resilient brand?
Yeah, I think having to know yourself and understanding what being vulnerable really means. I don't think I truly understood vulnerability until I read Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly. And it really opened my eyes to what being vulnerable meant. And in terms of being with somebody, saying something with somebody you're comfortable with, there was a situation I was in where I told my boss, who I was very comfortable with, I think we're starting to mission drift, which is a big concern for nonprofits, especially with donor cultivation. And so I laid it out there of, this is where I think we're going. This is what I think we need to do. And actually, it ultimately cost me a promotion in the company. Wow. Because it wasn't met with the response, like you were saying, it wasn't met with the response that I was expecting. But at the end of the day, I didn't have any regrets, because I knew what my values were. I was being authentic to who I am. And I saw my job as protecting the organization and protecting the donors and the people that we serve. And so I felt okay with it. Didn't bring me the outcome I expected at all, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, I did exactly who I am, being authentic to myself and how I would address the situation.
I can tell by the tone of voice, you did it, and you did it very well. You did it with conviction. and actually, there's been a comment in there that said, powerful example, Chrissy. And can you repeat the book title you just mentioned?
Yeah, it's called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. It's one of her first books.
I've read one of her books. I haven't read that one, but I read maybe the second or third, and I've actually heard her on NPR. As far as, yeah, she says she's on, and of course she's on YouTube. So it's Brene, I think it's BRNE_Brown.
Yep.
We do have Daring Greatly. Thank you. That's what it is. And thank you out there for chatting. I know Allison said she was going to help me, but I think I got this with Allison. But I wanted to ask it. And Courtney, thank you for your question. Courtney wants to know, how do you exhibit vulnerability in situations where that trait is seen as a weakness by others, particularly for women as a weakness, vulnerability, particularly within a quote unquote old school, older male environment?
I can take that one first because that's.
Okay, Kristen, I know she was ready. She was ready for that one.
So that's the environment that I work in. Chemical. I am the president of a chemical distribution company, and we are as old school, older male environment as you get. I think you have to read the room. So you can exhibit vulnerability, but you can exhibit vulnerability assertively. You can understand who your audience is and be vulnerable and still be strong at the same time. Vulnerability is not weakness. And I think we get those two terms mixed up.
Yes.
It's not a weakness. And it actually is a strength, but you have to know when to use it and with whom to use it and how to use it. And so I think there are ways that you can exhibit vulnerability, but do so it's not perceived as a weakness. And I can't tell you every scenario or how to do that, but I think you really have to read the room, read your audience, and understand. So, if you are dealing with an older male, old school type environment, you have to do it assertively, you have to do it with strength, and you have to do it with passion and compassion.
Oh, you said that. You said passion and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
What is the
Absolutely.
compassionate part? I know Sherry and Chrissy were getting ready to get on this too, as far as, oh boy, Sherry's eyes lit up and Chrissy was
Right.
like, I got a testimony. But no, when you say compassion, what do you mean by that?
Well, vulnerability, I think, is an opportunity for you to connect, for someone to connect with their audience. And so I don't believe you should be vulnerable without the expectation that some vulnerability come back to you. And so you have to, in my opinion, you should do it with compassion for the other side, because your expectation is that they will be vulnerable with you. And again, it doesn't mean weakness, but it just means being true to themselves and hearing what they say, and then attempting to listen effectively. So that's all I meant.
It's good. Passion and compassion as well, which most folks, I don't actually think, actually they're part of the same word, actually, but well put. Sherry, Chrissy, what do you think about vulnerability in situations where it's seen as a weakness by others? And I will say this, sometimes it's actually seen as a weakness by women. So it can be a weakness in an old school, old male environment, or it can be old school, old female environment, or any of the environments. It's culturally, it can be a variety of environments. But what do you do? What do you think about, how do you exhibit vulnerability in situations where it's seen as a weakness?
So I could see we all kind of jumped up when that question came up.
Yes,
there are, for me, once you get to a certain level, and I'm sure you all can attest, everyone in the room you are in believes that they are important, right? And so in particular, when you're in those meetings, if you don't speak up and share your ideas, I would love to have a show of hands of how many of us have been in a room and been thinking something like 20 minutes before, and then the room caught up and that comment was made, and you're like, why didn't I say that when I thought of it 20 minutes ago? And I think, right, like, and I actually believe that is a part of, you will wait until you feel like there is almost a consensus, so that you're not putting out an idea that people dismiss or look at you like you're crazy. Or you also have had the situation where you said something and someone else says it and just says the same thing in a slightly different way, and all of a sudden it's this awesome idea. And I think it takes vulnerability to continue to put yourself out there. And I think you have to show that, and you have to show the vulnerability to embrace something that isn't like completely vetted, right? Like one of the things that I've learned at Lilly, and I think that this remote working has been a great equalizer. I had to learn how to navigate the meeting before the meeting. And I love that, like, you can't really have those, or even during break, you can't go to the side and say, what's your thought on this? You know, like, now I'm sure there's still some pinging, but it's a lot less happening. And I think that that's a great equalizer in that sense. But I think our male counterparts in particular, they're encouraged to challenge and to think things through, and to speak as they think. And I think it's particularly important. I've spent a lot of my career focused on the international side of our business. And one of the things I had to learn for myself and become much more aware of is I am a person that speaks as I think. Like I am my mother's child. My filter, I got in the wrong line when God was handing out filters. It's not a strength for me. And, but because of that, I go and you just hear me talk. Well, think about if you are speaking a second language and you're translating and then trying to speak, how do you get a word edge in a room full of people like that? And so I try to make sure, particularly with people who are speaking in a second language, that you pause and make room for them and say, hey, you know, especially if you can tell that they were thinking about something, hey, what were you thinking? Because I think that that's important to get those thoughts.
Okay, Chrissy.
Yeah,
you're trying to have bite of this apple. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in terms of that situation, there's a couple things that come to mind. So not only reading the room, like was said, but also knowing how deep to go with your vulnerability. So you can take it a couple of different levels. And so knowing your room and knowing who you're talking to can kind of help navigate that. I also, for me, I believe so much in my personal brand and what I stand for and what I deliver, that I know when I'm sometimes in those tough situations, my track record will speak for itself. And so sometimes that buys a little bit of grace. And, you know, going back to the whole compassion thing, I have compassion for other people, realizing that if you have a strong personal brand, you're very self-aware and you're open, and not everybody is like that. So having that compassion for other people that maybe they're not as evolved in their awareness or don't want to be, I can have compassion in those conversations with those people.
And that's a compassion again. It's a concurrent theme. And by the way, I wanted one thing, shout out to Courtney out there. She asked a question that got you all perked up in the whole audience. We've got some people out there. I think Kelley said yes to things you were saying. I think when you were talking, Sherry and others. And she also wanted to let you know there's a meeting before the meeting, and yes, there's a meeting after the meeting. Right? And we're all shaking our heads. You know it's true. And that is a part of awareness for your personal resilient brand, knowing that's going to happen. And you also touched on this, but I'm going to ask a specific question in regards to recognition. Okay, I heard it touched on in your comments. And another quote that shared with me is, working in the darkness without attention is diminishing. So what are the best ways that you, or perhaps other women you know in the workplace, in strengthening and advocating their personal brand, what do they do, or the best ways to gain recognition and heighten the significance of your work, or perhaps other women's work?
So I'll start. I think part of it is just lifting other women up and other minorities up. And so really taking that opportunity in a meeting to call somebody out for a great idea. Sherry, you talk, sometimes people have that look on their face like they want something to share. So help amplify their voice in that meeting. Hey, Sherry had a really great idea. Sherry, can you repeat that for the group? But also too, really using those platforms at work. So we use Microsoft Teams, so giving shout outs in different channels to people. You know, if you're in a client meeting and the client says how great one of your team members is, share that with the rest of your team members online. And then the other thing I'd have to say is not only telling women one-on-one, you did a great job, or sending a handwritten note, but also nominating them for awards. There's no better way to get women in our community recognized than nominating them for awards and programs that are out there.
Now, Chrissy, I would love working for you, because you're like you're like the wind beneath women's wings out there. But I want to ask you, what do you do for you? How's your day and how the recognition or significance of your work?
Yeah, so I think even just today, for example, I posted on LinkedIn recognizing IU Day. This is where I gave. I encourage other people to. And hey, we're having this panel discussion. I didn't call out that I was in it, but just said, we're having this panel discussion. Here's what we're talking about. Would love to have you. And then there's also times where I do a shameless plug, and I'll post something on social media. When I did my TEDx talk at Lilly, I was very proud of that. And I shared that on social media so people could see that. And yes, every once in a while you have that naysayer, but you have 5 people that you're now are inspiring because you shared. So I think it's certainly acceptable for women to ring their own bells as well.
The research shows it's very acceptable for men, but women sometimes hold back because of the labels of, who does she think she is, or she's not a team player, or whatever the case may be. And that's what the research and the data shows. Okay, Sherry, Christian, so we don't want to work in the dark. You want your personal brand to be out there. What are the best ways for you to get it out there and gain recognition for the significance of your work?
Yeah, so for me, I think you also have to get past some of your own cultural hesitation, particularly women and women of color. I grew up, women should be seen and not, kids should be seen and not heard, and keep your head down, be respectful, work hard, do twice as much, and expect, just to get what others are getting. And I'm like, well, I'm not setting those kind of expectations for my children. You should get the same for doing the same work. But I think that is the reality of the environment we've inherited. I think being in leadership, it's our responsibility to change that. For me, when I came to Lilly, I was an experienced hire into Lilly, and it's a much more relationship-based company than I experienced when I worked at Ford Motor Company, just of the nature of it being Indiana, smaller, and I felt like at Ford, my performance within my department determined whether or not opportunities were brought to me. At Lilly, I had to learn that it wasn't just performance, but I also had to own and manage my network and relationships so that I would learn about and be considered for opportunities. And for me, I just had to make it not personal, right? Because I had a great supervisor when I first came in, and she forced me to do like a career plan that laid out my experiences and skills I already had. And she said, take this and walk people through your career plan. And it forced me to brag on myself because she had me do it in like a grid with just highlights so that I would have to say, this is what I mean by this. This is what I accomplished in this role. This is why I think I already have the skills for this profile. And this is what I want to do next. But she had to take me through that process kicking and screaming because I didn't want to be the person that set up time and then bragged about themselves and asked, are you ready to promote me? But our counterparts don't have a problem with that. And so if the people who are evaluating potential, they're going to assume that everybody's working from the same playbook. And if you aren't talking about what you've done, it's because you haven't done much. So you have to just remove yourself out of your own way and put that stuff on the table.
All right. You got a shout out from Ann. She says she loved the fact your supervisor made you do that. Even though you were reluctant, you've got to document on a regular, continual basis your accomplishments and not expect people to actually know them in order to gain recognition. I've worked with women and with men who, why didn't I get to promotion? And it was like, well, what did you do? Well, I thought everybody knew what I was doing. And because of culture, as a woman, as a female, like we might be related. I know some of my family members who said the same thing. That's not seen as it's not miscongeniality, it's not as to do that. But I am happy, Sherry, that your supervisor really pushed you to do that. And as far as, and also not to mention, well, I won't go on, but Christian, you're on the panel, not me. Let me get back to you. Okay, Christian, what about
No,
you? What are your tips
that
for women?
that was good, because I struggle with this, honestly. And if I can, I mean, we were just talking about vulnerability, and if I can be vulnerable for a moment. So I grew up working in a family-owned business, so it was a quite a quandary, because on the one hand, everybody just assumes I got the promotion because I'm family, so it's nepotism, right? But then on the other hand, I've had to really learn all aspects of the business, so people don't assume that I'm getting the promotion because I'm family. And so then it becomes very difficult for me to highlight my accomplishments, and go around touting what I've done. But I love what you said, Charlotte, about, taking time to periodically list those accomplishments and understand what they are. And I think, all women, all people should do that on a quarterly basis, if not monthly. Okay, what goals did you set for yourself this month? What did you accomplish? What didn't you accomplish that you wanted to accomplish? Sherry, I love that your supervisor there had you go through that process, because the one thing that I've learned from being in the working world for 25 plus years is nobody's going to advocate for you like you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when push comes to shove, yes, I will have those conversations. I need to do a better job about not working in the dark and highlighting the accomplishments, because I am so very team focused that I highlight the accomplishments of the team. And then I see those as personal accomplishments because I am working with the team. But at some point in time, you've got to highlight personal achievement. And even if that's, to yourself, to have that list, but then to have it at the ready to speak with other people about.
Oh, Kristen, I love that. The title of this is How to Advocate for You with a Resilient Personal Brand. It should be : Nobody's going to advocate
Yeah.
for
Or
you
you,
like
like you.
you. I'm
Yeah.
going to get a t-shirt, put Kelley on,
Yeah.
and wear it to my Teen Dynamics class at I-Corps. I'm serious. That's something I'm going to take away, as far as your personal brand, because no one knows you more than you.
That's right.
Right? And your
Yeah.
accomplishments, and having the courage to fight against whatever those socialized cultural expectations are, or assumptions for you, Kristen, that you got it from your family or whatever. So that goes right back into courage. So thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but one thing I wanted to just quickly say, one of the things that I have had to do multiple times with, and I usually have to do it with my female team members, is I will tell them to rewrite their performance summary as if they were writing about the work of one of their team members. Because it is amazing how much more they will actually advocate during calibration sessions for their team members, but when they talk about their own work, they're not as enthusiastic or complimentary. And so I say, okay, rewrite it as if you were writing it about Allison. Just put her name and think about the stuff you did, put her name in there, and then do find replace with I. But give me more. So that's one of the tricks that I do sometimes too for myself.
Oh, that is wonderful. I mean, I'm getting so much. It's like we're going to need more time, but I had to say it. Every time we see Allison face, that means she's getting ready to give me the hook anyway. So Allison, take it away from here. What's going on?
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. Lots of great conversations, and thank you all for just your vulnerability and your willingness to speak on so many of these topics. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so I do want to just try and share some of those with all of you. A lot of them, I think, with the theme, I think we have a lot of young professionals on the call today, looking just for some advice in some different areas. But one of those questions is, I think going back to when your conversation about being vulnerable and having some of those difficult conversations internally, maybe with your team members or supervisors or others. One of our attendees today struggles with how to, I think, position those conversations and speak up for themselves without being too sensitive or defensive. And just wondering if any of you have any personal experiences or tips on how a young professional can maybe do that a little bit more for themselves.
I can speak to my own experience. I think number one, the whole to thine self be true. Having a realistic view of your performance is number one. So don't think you are killing the game if you're just doing what's on your PM and rolling into work at 9 p.m. and making sure you in the car driving off by 4:45. You have to so start with being truthful to yourself first and making sure you're doing that. Then once you have done that, you have to know that no one is as invested in your career as you are. And the best way to grow is to get feedback. And feedback is a gift. It is not always comfortable, but it is a gift. And just like when you get a gift, if someone gives you feedback, you get to decide what you do with that feedback once you get it. But you should always receive it gracefully. Because if you give someone a gift and they're like, ugh, I can't believe you gave me this, you just won't give them a gift again. But if you give me a gift that I don't like and I still say thank you, or I decide, hey, that's not really something that I want to change about myself, the way that I receive the gift impacts whether or not I get that gift anymore. And so I think people should always, even if you don't agree with the feedback, receiving it gracefully is very important to make sure you keep getting it, because you want to know what people think of you. You can't react if you don't know.
And I think following up with that, seeking out feedback is important. Don't wait for people to give it to you, solicit it. Because again, that can become part of your resilient brand, but that can help you help others to understand you. And so if you're getting feedback and you act on that feedback, whether it's doing nothing because, hey, I don't think that that's quite accurate, or whether it's taking an action on something, that helps build your brand as well. And so I think we as a whole, people in the working world, but especially women, we don't actively solicit feedback. And I mean that genuinely from everywhere. I solicit feedback from my kids. Mm-hmm. Hey, what's one thing that you wish that I did as a mom, and what's one thing you wish that I didn't do as a mom? And if they, say, well, I wish you didn't ask me where I was all the time. Well, you can take that feedback. Thank you so much for giving it to me. I'm still going to know where you are. I still need to know where you are. So how can we make this work where I know where you are and I'm comfortable, but you don't, feel like I am smothering you or overburdening you with questions. So, I think that it builds your brand as well when you solicit feedback. And like Sherry said, you take it as a gift.
I think one thing that I learned early on in my career is not to have expectations of the other person's response. And so I think that helps me in situations as well, and helps me not take things personally. And then regarding feedback, I agree, giving other people feedback, giving them that opportunity, but also asking for feedback. And I found that if you can ask for specific feedback, how was my performance on XYZ task? Did you like how I presented this, or what would you change about how I presented that? That sometimes makes it easier for people to give feedback too. Because I will say one thing I've seen time and time and again in my career is I'd ask for feedback. Oh, you're doing great. Well, that doesn't help me learn. That doesn't help me grow. I think a lot of times men are afraid to give women feedback in the workplace. And so by asking more specifically, I was able to get more feedback than I would have ordinarily.
Thank you all so much. Definitely some great tips in there that I'm going to personally start implementing in my life as well. So thank you all. Another quick question, and by the way, again, if anyone has any others, feel free to chat them to us. We'll try to get to them. But another question from Lindsay, who sounds like she's done some amazing work in her company trying to build a cohort of women in resiliency, but it is asking for any tips or thoughts that you all might have on best ways to find potentially mentors or sponsors, maybe outside of your connections. Any things that you have all found helpful would be great.
I think networking events, going to networking events in this age of digital, attending online networking events, attending panel discussions like this. I think any opportunity you can get to hear diverse schools of thought, and really people who participate in networking events or on panels like this, whether they're an attendee or whether they are actually on the panel, I think they are automatically putting themselves out there to and open to talking about networking, talking about mentorship, whether they can be a mentor, whether they can connect you with other mentors. I think that's a good and easy way to find other people who you can connect with. And even if it's just a casual, an email mentorship, an email relationship, I think even those can be very beneficial, especially in this day and age.
I'd also recommend reaching out, asking your network on who's in their network that they can introduce you to. So when I meet with different people in my network and we talk about different projects or goals or what have you, always never being afraid to ask, is there somebody that you know that you think I should be introduced to? And they're usually willing to make that introduction and then make sure to ask. And also just take up for opportunity. So I can't tell you how many times people put themselves out there and I've seen other people not take up that opportunity. You definitely have to ask and follow through and have some pointed goals of what you're looking to achieve from that relationship, whether it be, I want to climb in my career at the current company, how do I do that from an outside perspective? Or I'd like to change careers, or I'd like to get into XYZ activity, asking some specific questions regarding that.
I think that.
Go ahead, Sherry. I want to add, the research shows that sponsors, real quick, sponsors look for the topic we have. They're looking for individuals who have a personal, resilient brand. So everything you've learned today, going back to the research as professor, if you exhibit that, sponsors are looking to sponsor. That's what they do. That's what they enjoy. So if you can pick up the tips today and use that, sponsors will be drawn to you. But go ahead, Sherry.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of think of a network as like press. There's no such thing as bad press. Like you can't have too big of a network. So I think being open and there are, only a few degrees of separation between us and anyone. And understanding that and knowing that and taking advantage and saying, hey, like I can get to President Obama with one person. My friend ran his campaign. And then if you can get to that person, she ran the financial portion of the campaign in Chicago. So if you have those, like, just if you think about who you know, not your best friend, but who you know, then your network is already vast. It's just a matter of whether or not you use that resource.
And I think the resilient brand goes so much into that, because if you're asking your network to make an introduction, they have to trust your brand. You're putting their name on the line by them making that introduction. So the more you have a stronger brand that's true and authentic, the more likely you're going to have those opportunities to grow your network larger.
Charlotte, I didn't know if you had any final, or our time went so quickly today, but any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I've been so inspired by this particular panel. For all of what they have shared. It supports, of course, as a professor, what the research actually shows. They were vulnerable and giving their own personal experiences, some of their successes. and their failures as they move from one company to another company, or as they establish themselves, outside of their family's name. And so I would say, not just based on the research, but also based on my own personal experience, this was a very rich and informative panel, and I am confident that our alumni, and I kind of looked, try to see who we were here. At one point we had over, I think, 113 folks on the call, and the calls did not mean 100 folks on the Zoom, excuse me, not a call, I'm old school. And the number of folks virtually did not drop. Just to let you know, they stayed steady, which means this has been a very, very informative panel. So the only thing I wanted to add was thank you. I've met some of you before. I've now finally met you. As you say, the degrees of separation are probably a lot smaller than what we know. And I also want to think, as alumni, my sense is for all you out there, these women are also available for us to network more closely with one another as we make a huge impression on our international, national, regional, and local communities as Kelley. So I'm very, very grateful and very, very inspired.
Amazing. Yes, I completely agree. And yes, a big thank you to all of you from the Kelley Alumni Association standpoint as well. I want to also a quick shout out and thanks to our sponsors for today, Busey Bank, IU Credit Union, Taft Law, Tire Rack, Visit Bloomington, and Wayne Tai Asia. They've been with us back from the start when we thought this program would be in person in Indianapolis over a year ago. And I just want to thank them for continuing to support these initiatives. And finally, I know Dean Kestner mentioned it, but today is IU Day, so I'd be remiss if I didn't share some more with you. So there's some links in the chat if you'd like to learn more about IU Day. So this attending here is a great support, but share your pictures and your support of IU Day on social media, find an event, or we do have some opportunities for you to make a gift to both Kelley Bloomington and Kelley IUPUI. Last I looked earlier today, we were second on the leaderboards, Kelley School of Business, for all of Indiana University. So take a look at those as well. Thank you guys all again so very, very much, and have a lovely afternoon.